Welcome to the discussion or conversations on the post-traditional concept of meditation and prayer. The following conversations are part of my research project on Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Catholicism, and their concepts of meditation and contemplative prayer from a post-traditional, post-religious, and intercultural perspective. The concept of meditation in Buddhism and the major philosophical traditions like yoga, conventionally and traditionally, is associated with the state of awareness and focused attention, holistic well-being, consciousness-changing techniques, spiritual enlightenment, etc. In the Christian tradition, the concept of meditation becomes contemplative prayer. The prayer meditation fills the mind with the thoughts of God and the relationship with God. In other words, contemplative prayer fills the mind with the thoughts of Christ and His works. It's a kind of kenotic or self-emptying act. In the post-traditional understanding or perspective, it means the shift from the metaphysical ultimate principles of grounding the concept of meditation and prayer to the ethical principles. In other words, the ethical principles of coexistence. I repeat, the ethical principles of coexistence. Ethical principles and perspectives mean the decentering act which results in a movement from self to the other. Hence, the object and practice of meditation and prayer as ultimately going beyond the self in order to transcend the reductionist and undialogical self-sameness, conservative and fundamentalist orthodoxy to a liberative and dialogical openness. The post-traditional understanding also means the religio-philosophical dimension of a tradition as it is viewed from a post-religious, post-secular point of view. In such a view, the core of the ethical claims of a tradition shifts from ritual to value. The core of ethical claims become a system of values, not a system of rituals. The core of the ethical claims then will be by virtue of its very nature dialogical, open to the other. Therefore, meditation and prayer become a dialogical engagement that leads to intercultural coexistence. Meditation and prayer become the ethical principles of coexistence and that which add to the meaning dimension of the cultural and political life worlds. The post-traditional and post-metaphysical understanding of meditation also proposes the concept of interbeingness and the biosphere. That means interbeingness, the whole of the biosphere, the whole of the project of life. It more truly assumes that the intercultural beingness of the cultural multitudes and the intercultural political process in the form of mutually determining life in the communities. Let us move on to the discussions.
An academic session in which we discuss about the major seminar and the project that we were doing about religious practices in Himalayan spaces, meditation, mendicants, medicine, myths, monasteries. So many ideas are coming in, particularly when we talk about religious practices as rituals, as value orientations. We cannot restrict to a kind of old cosmology or cosmogony worldview and its metaphysics, because we are living in a post-traditional age. So the seminar was actually concentrating on this very interesting aspect and different perspectives and discourses related with that. And I have today with me a great scholar, well known in this region, and who was the former Vice Chancellor of Sikkim University and a well-known anthropologist and a sociologist who has done exemplary work in this field. Professor Subba. This name is an household name in Nehu, Shillong area. Welcome, sir, to this academic edition of our international seminar related themes. So, sir, how would you look at the whole seminar briefly? The inspiration, and as I was telling, religious practices from different angles. So there are people who say that religion is meaningless and absurd. Religion can be reduced into a pre-scientific understanding. It can be thrown out from the human domain. I don't think it is possible because religion is a very dominant discourse along with other discourses. So I am really fascinated by your theme about your proposal about this different cultures, different orientations of religion, different understanding of religion coming together and existing. So kindly say open your mind about this.
I think the theme of this seminar itself says a lot. We're talking about religious practices and plural. First of all, whatever we consider as religious practice in singular is never only religious. It is also at the same time social, in the sense that we do whatever we do in terms of in the name of religion is based on our upbringing, is based on our beliefs, based on our values, etc. So it's also social in that same sense, and also it's political. Political in the sense that if we don't do certain things that we are expected to do as Hindu or as Christian or as Muslim, then there will be political repercussions. You may be not recognized as a member of the community. Your privileges as a member of the community may be withdrawn partially or fully, etc. So, what is purely religious is something that doesn't exist. What is religious is also at the same time political, is also at the same time social, economic, cultural,
ethical, moral.
Yes, ethical, moral, etc. This is something that we need to highlight, we need to emphasize on. And the word practice in plural is also something that we need to celebrate. Because even if you belong to the same minority community, numbering only about 200 families or 300 families, you will be living in, say, 2-3 different villages. And take any religious practice, whether related to birth, marriage, or death, or about harvest, about transplantation, whatever you take, there will be huge variation in the way it is performed. A particular practice happens, a particular ritual is performed, a particular religious activity happens. It happens in a very, very kind of diverse manner, from village to village. And this continues to happen because each village thinks that the way it celebrates a particular festival, or the way it propitiates a particular deity, is the best way it should be done. It's the only way it should be done. And the way other villages are doing is not really the right way. This is the kind of a mentality you will find in the villages. This is also the reason why the diversity in the religious practices continues to exist. And we should not condemn that, and we should not try and say that, well, this is a small community and they perform one death ceremony in so many different ways. There are some people who think that, who say that they should do it in one way. They should speak the language in one particular manner, in which it means that there will be dialectical variations across places, villages, and that's not allowed. Some people think that this is the best way our language should be spoken, and this is the only way everybody should speak. Because we all speak in dialects. Though sometimes for the sake of expressions, we say that I speak in this language, I speak in that language, I speak in Nepali, I speak in Bangla, but I speak one kind of Bangla or one kind of Nepali.
Yes.
I speak the dazzling variety of Nepali. I don't speak the Nepal variety of Nepali. So that diversity in the way a language is spoken, in the way a particular religious festival or religious practice is performed, is something that we need to celebrate. Should not say that this is the urban way of doing it, that's the rural way of doing it, that's a rustic way of doing it, that's a violent way of doing it, and ours is the civilized way of doing it. That kind of nonsense are found in society regarding religious festivities, religious sacrifices, etc. But that is not a good idea. In cultures, what happens in societies is that we come across people of all faiths, all cultures, all languages, and knowingly or unknowingly we borrow something from others. And others also borrow from us.
Yes.
And whatever we borrow, what happens that we give them our own color. And sometimes after a couple of generations, it becomes very difficult from whom we borrowed it. It becomes so much part of us.
Yes.
And that even if the word sounds a little bit of foreign or alien, it has become part of our linguistic vocabulary. So this happens, and then it becomes very difficult to know what is it that is your own and what is it that you have borrowed from others. It is possible that you have started with say 100 words or 200 words, and the rest of the words have been all borrowed. Khasi language, for instance, has about 40% of the words which are borrowed. English has more than 60% of the words which are borrowed. Now, that doesn't make the language poorer. That makes only the language richer. More the borrowing takes place, that richer the language becomes, because the language fulfills the needs for expressing every object, expressing about every feeling, every object, every emotion, etc. For which your own language may not have the words. So, but this goes on. At the same time, what I'm trying to say is this: that it is possible to find out, if we work hard, which are the original kind of stock of words that belong to our language, the primal words of the language, and which are the language words or language aspects of language or culture or religion which we have borrowed from others. Now, the ones which you have borrowed from others normally will be reflected in the language. If these words are borrowed words, the practices are also borrowed. And over the period of time, we may also develop our own words, but still it is possible to say which is our original stock of words and original religious kind of orientation, religious structure or religious architecture, and what are the things that have been added on over a period of time in history. And more difficult it is to know the origin of a particular word in your language, older it is.
Yeah.
So, when you are in a position to say that, for instance, in Khasi language, the word baje is from, say, Hindi baji, or the Khasi word secret is from English word cigarette. So, like that, if you are able to identify from which language it has been borrowed, that these are recent acquisitions. Now these have been all part of cultural language, but these are recent acquisitions. And these are visible on the surface. And those which are not visible on the surface are beneath the surface. And some you cannot really understand or even find out from where these words have ever come. So such are these parts of culture, which or religion. So those are the original ones. We cannot say how many years it needs for certain religious practice to be what we call original. Like certain communities remain migrant communities forever. Even I may have, for instance, my community may have come to India 200 years ago, but still I'm a migrant. I don't know how many years do I need to be called a local person. I'm a migrant in most places wherever I go. Though my ancestors may have come 200 years ago, more than 200 years ago. So similarly, in religious and cultural matters also, there is no fixity of tenure here to consider which religion is your original religion and which are the aspects of religion which you have borrowed from others, or aspects of culture which you have borrowed from others. That's why I was talking about a kind of a sedimentation of culture, sedimentation of religion, etc. Because we may not be able to know exactly how thick this particular layer, sedimentation layer, but mixing, borrowing is something you cannot deny. That is going on. There is no religion that has remained untouched by other religions. There is no language that has remained untouched by other languages, and if it has remained so, then it is in danger of extinction.
Exactly. So according to the intercultural hermeneutics, we say that there is no culture, only cross-cultural, intercultural realities. So from the point of view of cross-cultural and interreligious understanding of religion we understand as cultural expression. Culture we understand as religious expression, as you rightly said. So then the next reality is religious plurality. Just like multicultural plurality, multicultural reality, we have religious plurality. Both are true. Both are, which we can't deny, they are there. So from this point of view of interreligious plurality or religious plurality, we have to think about dialogue. Because dialogue, interreligious dialogue, interfaith dialogue, which has been there in the last maybe last century and this century. Because without that, we can't understand the reality of not only science, not only religion, not only culture, but science. And now scholars are telling, philosophers of science are telling that no sciences. There are different kinds of sciences. So even to that level they have gone. So my effort, perhaps in the seminar I was trying to make, to look at the concept of meditation from this intercultural, interreligious and multicultural point of view. So I say that meditation is not a self-centered technique alone. Of course you can achieve so many things there. But the most important realization of meditation is in dialogue, in intercultural communication, realizing the other, understanding the other. As you said, these are all sedimented. We have borrowed a lot, acknowledging that.
Yeah, I mean, intercultural dialogue is very much possible because we all know something about the other.
Yes.
And we have in our culture something of the other cultures as well.
Definitely.
So that's not an issue, but the issue is whether we're willing to accept that we our genes are already they contain diverse sources. So that kind of mentality that a sense of superiority, that my religion is the best religion. Or my God is the most powerful God. that kind of thinking associated with religion is what stops religions from coming together. Otherwise, there is, I think, there is no reason. That's why I liked Pranami Dharma, that kind of cult in Hinduism, which says that all religions are the same, and then they kind of they exhibit the mixed nature of religious practices. But
Mahatma Gandhi was a champion of the Sarva Dharma Samabhava.
I did a small research on Pranami Dharma many years ago, and then I published in the Journal for Religion and Society. That comes out in Bangalore. It used to come out, I don't know whether it still does.
Journal of Dharma?
Religion and Society.
Religion and Society.
Now this is something that I think educated people like us need to also promote, because we are living in a time when religious fanaticism is growing, and Hindus can blame the Muslims can blame the Hindus, but I think these are all interrelated. And then I think what is happening in the name of religion is very non-religious,
irreligious,
or anti-religious thing happening. Or what is happening in the name of religion is political. And not really religious. And I don't think any religion teaches you to hate other religions.
No.
And if a religion does so, then it's not really religion. Right? So religion is for the moral guidance of people, for keeping the people within certain moral bounds. And if a religion teaches you to hate other religions, then it's not really religion. That religious hatred spills over society, and then the society becomes it becomes anarchical. So that is something that we need to promote, and keep telling people that this is the nature of religion that we understand, and this is the kind of mixed nature of religion. But there is no religion which is pure. There is no religion which has not borrowed elements from other religions, etc. Because religious interaction or dialogue has happened always for centuries. For centuries, it has happened. It's not something that we are trying to bring new. We're going to start new, and that's not true.
So it's been already there. That's like osmosis, as Manikar was telling.
Maybe it was not happening in organized manner.
Yeah, in a very creative manner, spontaneous manner it's taken place.
And at the kind of kirtans, those jatras which we used to have, these are also one form of kind of religious socialization.
Yeah. And one proposal which was made in this connection by a well-known philosopher, theologian, ethicist, Hans Kuhn. He said we need to have global ethics, because religious ethics are limited, reductionistic, parochial. So we have to go for a global ethics. We take the best. In every religion there are some good elements. Take the best and make a global ethics. So as he was struggling for that, and he was a Catholic theologian, and because of his very pronounced ideas, he was silenced by the Pope. That's another funny thing. He was asked not to speak.
I'm also glad to know that among the Christians now, whom I guide is Christian.
Yeah.
Now, what is happening is that the young bloc, particularly, they are saying that we don't have any denomination.
Yeah.
I'm not a Catholic.
Very big awareness.
I'm not a Presbyterian. So the denominational divisions which are quite strong there, which sometimes affect the marriages also.
Yeah.
Because either the girl or the boy has to accept the choice of the other person. So now I think a new movement is happening where the denominational boundaries are being de-recognized.
Yes.
Like some young among the Christians.
This is what I was trying to call in my presentation.
This can happen among the Christianity. And if it can also be learned by other religious groups, it's great.
That will strengthen democratic coexistence. That's it. This particular thing that you were talking about, that's what one aspect of that's what I was trying to call my post-religious understanding of religion. This conventional metaphysical understanding of religion, which is talking about very strong, not dialoguing. And this is mine, myself, my correctness, my church. Instead of that, there is a syncretic kind of idea. There is a kind of dialogical idea. So I take from you. You are welcome to take from me. That attitude is a very important attitude. So I think, according to Hanscom also, this is the only solution for the world crisis now. That's what he was telling. Otherwise, he was not talking in the sense of that old idea, the civilizational fight. There was an American thinker. Not in that sense he was telling, but religion is always expressed in the form of cultures. So we have to take the best of that culture. And how that culture is promoted ethically, that is to be globalized. That globalization effort is to be made.
Yeah, the kind of crisis we talk about India is not just limited to India. It's
global.
It's happening everywhere. Some kind of nationalism mixed with religion and politics, and that is happening everywhere.
Yes.
Then partly because of the failure of the governments in solving employment issues, solving governance issues. So they turn the entire matter towards things that people love talking about, which is religion.
That is a totalitarian technique. So by which they can actually divert the attention of the people from real democratic issues. So religion in India is increasingly becoming a kind of false commodity.
Yeah, it gets first to democracy.
Yes. Yeah. So from your point of view, with that we will stop perhaps. What do you understand by prayer or meditation? I think both are the same. No, I think in prayer, if you remember, suppose if I am in Silchar, I think about Subba intimately. That moment of dialogue, discussion I spent with Subba, it was great. That evening I enjoyed. That's a prayer. I think there is an energy transfer there.
I think both the words prayer and the meditation, these are used more in the sense of tools.
Yes.
Tools to achieve something, and they're never seen as an end in self.
Yeah.
I think that we need to change that strategy, is to follow it. Don't make these things utilitarian. You're trying to achieve something through prayers, through meditation, etc. Why can't meditation or prayer be an end in itself?
Yes. Unless they transcend from their frameworks, initial framework, they are meaningless. That's what I think.
Yeah. Otherwise, what happens that if you use them as tools and you're not able to achieve the end, then the tools get rejected.
Yes.
Which is not good.
Exactly.
I don't think rejecting or doing away with prayers or meditation is a good idea. These are harmless, good things, and they should be continued.
Yeah.
But these do not yield result. When people will say, what's the use of meditating? What's the use of saying prayers? Nothing happens, so I'll stop from today. That's not really a solution.
Yes.
But that is happening in some cases because we use these words in the sense of method, in the sense of medium, in the sense of tools. So, in my view, I think that perspective has to change about meditation, about prayers, and meditation should be. If someone wants to use it as a medium, it's fine. But we should not all use it as a medium. We should also consider using it as an end itself.
Yes.
Without expecting anything.
Yes.
Whether it will help me health-wise or mentally or spiritually I'm not. I want to do meditation. Right?
Yes.
I think that kind of approach also is needed. It can be too narrow kind of approach to very good things like meditation.
So thank you so much for your valuable time and sharing your very important valuable thoughts about meditation, religion, culture, etc. Thank you so much. Was worked on neuroscience and religion, philosophy of science. Hearty welcome to our program. Actually, we have been having this seminar, we are also part of that. My first question is, meditation as practice or spiritual, branded spiritual, for enlightenment, awareness, well-being, harmonious living. But from a post-traditional point, post-traditional religion is making a dialogue. All religion is making a dialogue with the religious plurality dimension. There is a lot of culture, there is a lot of religion, there is a lot of ethnicity. So our situation is multi-religious, multi-cultural, multi-ethnic. So we talk about religious plurality in the sense of religion expressed as culture. So from that point of view, we have to think about the post-tradition understanding of meditation. Meditation is not simply a spiritual technique or a religious technique. It is a political tool, it is an ethical tool, it is a spiritual tool, it is a social tool. It has got so many dimensions. So what do you think about those dimensions? From your idea of, say, maybe neuroscience, new lines, neuroscience is throwing on meditation as such. Meditation or prayer, both are, I think both are same in the ultimate analysis. Meditation and prayer are the same. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pius, for this informed question, and all the more for having me as part of this research project. I found this seminar very fabulous, pulling together several resources across the globe, and this unique theme of this seminar is all the more enlightening, inspiring. And I found it more like a colloquium more than a seminar. Several scholars really interacting among themselves and enriching each other. And in that regard, this was really unique and different from the sort of routine academic exercises done everywhere. I appreciate this aspect of this. Now, coming back to your question, as in the post-traditional understanding of spirituality, understanding of meditation, I would say perhaps what is complementing this sort of spirituality as envisaged in the post-traditional philosophy is neuroscience itself. Neuroscience has a lot to contribute and complement this sort of idea of spirituality that you just presented here. In fact, why do I say? Because nowadays the epithet neuro is attributed almost to every branch of knowledge. Accordingly, neuro-religion, neuro-theology, neuroethics, all these things have come up. Now the exponents of neuro-religion are studying meditation and the neurology of religious experience scientifically. And the findings that they come up with is really marvelous, astonishing, I would say. This is in a way a restoration of the pristine, lost horizons of spirituality. The post-traditional perspective that we have been outlining here is not exactly that post-modern or post-traditional. This is in a way a restoration of the lost Eden of our spirituality. And in restoring that, lost horizons of our Christian spirituality. Neuroscience is helpful because the neuroscientists, exponents of neuro-religion, are scanning the brains of Franciscan nuns and Buddhist monks with the highly sophisticated scanning techniques and study as to what is happening, what is going through their brain while they are meditating. And the final point of trance that they reach it, there are elements of God, not just elements, but typical cosmic mysticism is literally embodied there at that level. One feel at one with the universe. While I was studying this, I was astonished to see the writings of Pamplany, which comes very close to the Indian understanding of the highest level of mysticism, where it says, at that level of experience, a father is no longer a father. Gods are no longer gods. Vedas, ancient sacred scriptures of the Hinduism. Vedas are no longer Vedas. Withering away of the so-called gods, withering away of the so-called sacred scriptures. Not that we don't need them, but we should not get stuck up with them. This is the sort of spirituality that is presented by the neuroscience, the exponents of neuro-religion. This is the level of mysticism that is reached at through the meditative processes of the Buddhist monks and the Franciscan nuns are studied by the neuroscientists. The central tenets of religious pluralism, the public space that is shared by all religions, beyond the ritualistic boundaries, dogmatic and doctrinal differences. All these things are literally embodied here, or enacted here. Yes. So I would say it is in that regard that I say neuro-religion very much complements the post-traditional understanding of spirituality.
Thank you. It's very interesting dimension that you've added to my own observations and the kind of theoretical modules that I was trying to propose, or tools which I was trying to propose. Another thing, perhaps, you've already answered, it's beautifully answered. You said, human brain is wired to have a God sense. This is my personal thought. So is it a God sense or a metaphysical sense? Because recently an author said, human beings are metaphysics homesick. Even in a highly scientific, secular society, people find out metaphysics. Because that is a search for meaning. And our brain is actually wired for God or for me.
Yeah, question is very well framed. In the sense, I am glad that you did not use the term God spot, rather you coined the term God sick.
Metaphysics, homesick.
God sense first is.
God sense.
And metaphysically, we humans are sick. This reminds me of Saint Augustine's statements that we have innate quest for the ultimate and the transcendent.
Until I reach Him, my mind is
restless, basically, that is the point. In fact, this is the right formulation of the findings of the neuro-religion as what I am inclined to think. Qualitative, I am saying, but to qualify this statement in the sense, neuro-religion, contrary to the popularist or conventional ideas of the critics of religion, that religion is a construct of society or is an invention of the priests and so on, neuro-religion goes a step further and says that this is something innate to us. We human beings are biologically programmed to have a sense of God. Okay. And what is the content of that sense? Is it really of God? Is it really of something metaphysical or transcendental? Only relative to the subjects that these neuroscientists are studying, the answer to this question varies vigorously. As for the Buddhist monks, it's an experience of the void that is coming much close to the second terminology that he coined, that is metaphysical sense. Where we humans are more sick with metaphysics, something of the experience, liberative experience of the void, experience of learning. Whereas when it comes to Franciscan nuns, this experience is also correlated with an affective experience. There is a content of love for them. So what is already there in our, already what we have already inherited from our upbringing and training in spirituality is also.
I am allowed to intervene. Buddha saying, that's what I was saying in my paper. Many Buddhist scholars say that this experience of the void or emptiness is compassionate.
Yeah, that is in there where really fullness, not merely nothingness. Okay, in that regard, so in as much as we term our metaphysics as something rich with the meaning, rich with affectivity, rich with love, there is no problem in calling it as pure metaphysical experience. Our quest for the metaphysical, as much as this is completely absorbing the totality of our anthropological nature, I will have no difficulty in that. Whereas metaphysics conceived as pure abstract sense, I think neurology has more to contribute in the understanding of spirituality. Okay, neuro-religion altogether does not leave us in complete void and nothingness. Okay, neither Buddhism nor the Catholic mysticism are studied by. There is a rich content to this experience that absorbs the fundamental anthropological cause of us human beings.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So, if you could explain or tell us more about the major studies which are taking place, great thinkers, philosophers, or neuroscientists who are contributing to this
probably I should mention certainly Andrew Newell. He was the, I am not sure if he's still the head of the, while conducting these researches, he had been head of the Department of Neuroscience at Pennsylvania University. Also, his colleague Carol Albright, then Eugene.
Their works are all available.
Very. Why God won't go away? Hardwired for divine. These are metaphor science. Also, Eugene Aquino. This was co-authored by him. Then Carol Albright also has a number of publications around this line. Then Virayu Ramachandran, he was rated as one of the top 10 scientists to be watched out in the 21st century by time magazine. He hails from Chennai in Kerala. And
He is from Chennai, from Kerala, Palakkad. But what is Chennai?
That is Sudarshan. I think he's originally from Chennai.
Oh, he's from Chennai.
Yeah. I'm not sure originally is he from. We can check that. Okay.
He is from Chennai.
I see.
Then he is from Palakkad, maybe in Palakkad. From there, he has gone to Viliyanur. That that means Ur means mostly it could be Malayali.
I see.
I think so. I have no idea. I've heard this name. I've read also.
And phantoms in the brain, telltale brain. These are the popular books published by him, but bestsellers, all of them. He is studying a particular phenomenon called the temporal lobe epilepsy. That is to say, persons with the temporal lobe epilepsy tend to be showing high mystical tendencies during the seizures, it seems. It's a very strange phenomenon. That is the subject of his study. It's interesting. And these are the problems. There are many others also. There are also R. Joseph is an author. He is not exact. For a comprehensive understanding, it is important to read the critical works also. R. Joseph is an important author who has criticized this sort of positive interpretations of neuroreligion. They say what these studies are suggesting is towards the non-existence of God, because we can say all these religious orientations or so-called reports are mere hallucinatory states of mind. He is one of the critics of this view. But say with an external injection, if you take ketamine for a while, you can have some sort of hallucinatory experiences. These such sort of experiences that you are misconceiving as religious experiences. Critics are arguing, he is arguing. but he is very well confronted by the other side. We can say that easily. We can say that none of the transformative experiences or that comprehensive overarching experience of the religious mysticism as reported by these meditators is not anywhere present in the temporary and transitory experience generated through drugs, basically. So this kind of criticisms do not hold much value. R. Joseph has been explaining the conversion of Saint Paul as well as Moses seeing God and so on as the projections of the temporal law. The firings because of the gradual constant exposure to the sun during the journey through the desert. He has the neurons.
There are some other thinkers also who are discussing about philosophy of mind and of course challenging these kind of things. Because the mind-body relation related, lot of studies are there. I have quite a few with me. They are challenging these ideas. Of course, neuro-religion. But I don't think they are able to really challenge it from this point of view. Because this perspective will stand out.
Basically, why I am taking this subject seriously, more than what the reports that they gave, I find a profound ontology and metaphysics underneath these sorts of reports, because basically it implies a complementary vision of the matter and spirit, the unity of the body and mind, body-soul unity. This has been the perennial teachings of the traditional religions as well, traditional philosophies as well. So, something that we lost in our conceptual evolution, in our philosophical developments over the history, we are rediscovering today. And many other findings in physical science, especially in quantum physics, other branches of neuroscience, mind studies and so on, also complement this kind of idea. The religiosity itself as an evolutionary product. There are biological grounds for our religiosity. This being the state of affairs, like any other talent, religiosity also needs to be nurtured and facilitated. Some liberative philosophies say at the age of 18, when one has become an adult, let him choose his religion only. Whether I should be a believer or which religion I should be belonging to. This might sound very liberative and progressive apparently, but going by this sort of information, we need to say that is not that sound and anthropology. Because we cannot tell a child that after the age of 18, let him decide as to what food whether I should eat or not, or what food I should take. So
that's a long nurturing training process.
This is something to be as a meaning framework, meaning horizon. This is something that our mind is incessantly in need of from the childhood. I am inclined, because this implies an integral anthropology, the findings of. On the one hand, it substantiates the authentic anthropological foundations of our religiosity, and it confirms the metaphysical grounds of our spirituality as advocated by traditional religions. At the same time, it frees religions from the cultural conditioning, ritualistic formalisms, and other pragmatic enslavements. This is the liberative potential of neuro-religion that I find.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your valuable time. And I have with me Professor Prasenjit Biswas, the original thinker, philosopher of this region. He is the Professor of Philosophy, Northeast Department of Philosophy, NEHU, Northeastern Hill University. Welcome to our conversation.
Thanks for inviting me to this conversation.
Thank you. So, to be very brief, meditation and prayer are basically some kind of nostalgic and ethical understanding of oneself from the four dimensions of relationships. That's what I understand.
Sure.
My relationship with myself, relationship with the other, relationship with society, relationship with the cosmic beyond and nature. So this perhaps is a post-conventional understanding of it.
Sure.
So that way, meditation, the most important figure is the other.
Yes.
Otherness. So what we have to gain is the otherness of the other. Of course, this is a very important theme in Western philosophy. You have worked on that, you're a scholar in that area. So, in the context of the whole of this meditation prayer, there is a political purpose. This political purpose is either to reduce the whole of Indian religiosity into a ritualistic, or I don't want to use the word Brahminical, but in the Dalit literature they use this word, so I use it as a category. Not to defame the Brahmins, there are excellent, very good Brahmins, but the whole of Indian intellectual growth is spearheaded by Brahmins. But this Brahminical, ritual, virulent Hinduism. Because recently there was a book published by Appuestos about Mahatma Gandhi. It's a very interesting book. And he was telling the fellow who killed Mahatma Gandhi. His confession is this: I am not against Mahatma Gandhi. My problem is, he diluted Hinduism with ahimsa. Hinduism is a very powerful religion, retaliating, killing, but he diluted it with ahimsa. He made Hinduism weak. The other side, we have a very important liberative tradition. I remember Kapan, as I said in my presentation. That is a kind of ethical religiosity, where even the concept of God itself is a weak God. A God who is failing. The underlying idea is Mahakaruna, compassion. So this politics is standing. So in the context of this politics only, this concept of meditation is becoming very, very important. I call it post-metaphysical, post-religious, all that. So how do you respond?
Yes, I mean, there are kinds of rationality that is involved in politics. One, of course, is responding to certain contingencies that arise as a kind of a challenge in a certain encounter with the other. The other aspect of it is a deeper cultural, historical, biological, natural, and so many other aspects of the relationship with the other, which is non-manifest in a sense. And this non-manifest part of our relationship with the other actually heavily influences our enactive self. We keep on enacting ourselves on certain terrains which are actually entirely coming from the other. Even the language that we speak, that comes from the other. That's not really my language. So therefore, there is this inbuilt otherness. There is an indissociable, inalienable otherness with which we move into any kind of social action, with which we move into something that is collectively formed as collective intentionality, which is directed towards the other, because what other directs us to, a kind of a reverse directedness that happens from the other, and the kind of initial directedness that we have towards the other. That exchange of directedness or directednesses between me and the other individual, is the space of negotiation. And therefore, this happens in multiple ways. In fact, it is connected at the same time in parallel with a variety of aspects. And these can be termed in a discursive manner. A large part of it is non-discursive, which is felt, with which we have an emotional kind of connection. And we do not have a proper linguistic discursive understanding of our emotional connection with the other. So therefore, meditation can be a kind of a reflexive activity. It reflects on how we deal with our own emotions. And as we deal with our own emotions, how we are conscious that we are dealing with our own emotions. So there is this two-layer consciousness. A consciousness directed to the other, and the consciousness of being directed towards the other, which is a kind of self-consciousness, not having a centered self, but of course a centered self, which can be seen across the board, everywhere, wherever self is directing its attention. So therefore, this kind of intersubjective sphere in which we are posing ourselves as a self in relation to another over and against another, is an ontological space of dialogue, is an ontological space of relationality. The being of that relation is our own being. Our own being is not outside the being of that relation. So therefore, we have to discover being of that relationality, which is our own being, and which is not readily available. It emerges through a dialogue, it emerges through an encounter, and meditation has to envelop itself through that encounter. Meditation cannot be something which is self-immune. Rather, it should be open to that kind of
Exactly.
That openness is part of a new form of meditation, which is not merely centered on oneself, but it is extended, intensively extended towards other intentionalities, which is not available in oneself, but towards which one must be more sensible, by way of expanding one's own sphere of self-consciousness, in order to meet the other at a certain distance in a different horizon altogether. So this is how an idea of meditation can become politically more resurgent, in the sense that it can re-induce a new sense of agency, which is not centered on oneself. A sense of agency which is decentered, which is entirely responsive to the other, can come through that kind of way.
Yes. I think that very, very interesting, very interesting. So, this kind of relationality that you're talking about, this multiple dimension of that, discussing, imaginative, many other things. Perhaps I was trying to name it, not correct, intercultural. Ethical, intercultural. We need not delimit the whole thing. We cannot reduce it also. But for the sake of designation, we call it intercultural. So what I'm thinking is, if you look at India, particularly, and along with this Buddhism, Buddhism means it is not one. It's not a monolith. It is multi-dimensional, lot of dimensions to it. As it progresses, this tradition I'm talking about, we have people like say, for example, Rabindranath Tagore, Mahatma Gandhi, Brahmabandhu Vajpayee, Keshav Chandra Sen, Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansa, Iqbal, from all traditions, it's syncretic, from all traditions we have people, from all cultures we have people. And for example, even Jittu Krishnamurti was telling what does meditation means. You say Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola 100 times, then you will fall into a trance. That is meditation, that's what he was telling. So that perhaps is coming to maybe a kind of extreme of what I call the intercultural or non-discursive understanding or discursive understanding of meditation. So what do you think about this lineage in India of meditation? As you said, this political kind of understanding of meditation, would you like to connect more names to this? Sure. Perhaps there's no meaning in telling everybody is connected with meditation, every political practice, but there are very visible cases.
For example, in India's freedom struggle, which is a struggle for removing the colonial powers, now extends to the phase of decolonization, which is to remove this colonial epistemic structure within which we try to operate in a uniform way. They're rediscovering oneself by sort of giving out, by reneging the colonial commitments that had grown in us. Is a phase of decoloniality which is coming outside the colonial metrics of power relations. So this kind of a decoloniality and the decolonial mindset, that is very much present. At this moment, the moment when we are trying to construct a new identity, a kind of a new social movement, or even a kind of group identity, whenever we are trying to construct that. In all that, there is a lineage of making a specific group identity and to deal with the difference with the other. Now this difference with the other has to be dealt in ethical terms, otherwise difference becomes a potent weapon to weaponize one's own existence, which is non-meditative, which is rather more coming in a confrontational mode. So we have to see the lineage of the confrontational mode and the lineage of the meditative mode that wants a kind of a transformation of the relationship between the self and the other. Now, Anushilan Shamiti, as you know in Bengal, was the revolutionary kind of a group which continued the revolutionary struggle against the British government. And they used to have something like a secret of their struggle, which they will never speak out. And what was the secret of their struggle? The secret is to sacrifice themselves. As long as one is in the battle, one will not come back from the battle. That was the secret. Now, here also in the process of decolonization, we have to go ahead to the point which is a point of no return. And that point of no return can be arrived at only by a meditative process, by a contemplative process, by a process of reformulating our existing practices in a critical manner in which we stand for the good of the others and we do not stand for mere self-preservation.
Exactly.
So there we have to differentiate against our own selves in order to deal with the ethical difference that we have with the other subjects. And that is a meditative process of learning, or rather unlearning the entire colonial past or the baggage that we carry in our experiential life, in our lived world, has to be given up in order to see it in a fresh way, how that relationship is shaping out. And that will be something post-religious, post-secular, beyond the binaries that are created by the modern and the postmodern discourse.
I think this is happening in pedagogy, this is happening in social theory, this is happening in new understanding of deliberative democracy. All these areas this is happening.
Yes.
So
we move from the meditative to the deliberative, which is very, very important.
Meditative to deliberative
and back to the meditative. So that
this
we
is
have
a mutual kind of determining of our praxis, of our democratic exercise, democratic living, existence.
Yes.
Thank you so much for this great, your valuable time. We are cutting it short because we are time limit. We continue this dialogue. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. So as part of our conversation about meditation and prayer, we have a great scholar, Professor David Palmer from Hong Kong University. He's a sociologist, he is an Indologist, he's a philosopher rolled into one. The kind of field study that he has done, the area in which he is working as an American is very, very important. The kind of cultural praxis, the cultural academic praxis that he is doing in the context of Hong Kong is very much in the backdrop of our discussion. Anyway, I restrict our conversation to the concept of meditation and prayer. So, the first area that I would like to ask you is how do you look at the whole discussion that we were having about meditation and prayer as a kind of our willingness or understanding to know the other, to know the otherness, particularly in your context. Your context is a Chinese context, your context is an American Western context. And prayer and meditation is making a very important fusion, a very unique fusion in your context. From that context point of view, particularly your new kind of efforts to understand and to live as a Baha'i. That will be my first query.
Okay.
I would like to know from you first.
All right. So first of all, thank you for this such a kind introduction, but I'm really no Indologist. I've only been to India. This is my 5th visit to India. It's a completely new land for me. I was just thinking as I was listening to you and Prasenjit talking, how such a different mindset it is from the Chinese mindset, and again how so different it is from the Western mindset. So that's why I love coming here, because it's just so different. I've been studying China for a very long time, and now I feel very familiar with the Chinese world, although of course there's always so much to learn. So, and also I'm not American, I'm Canadian. I'm half Canadian and half French, and my home is in Hong Kong, China. Right. So, But meditation and prayer, and the relationship between meditation and prayer, and the relationship with the other. Actually, I think this is a really interesting question because both in the course of my academic research, I've done a lot of research on Chinese meditative traditions, which are nowadays known as Qigong, and also in the Taoist tradition. And I've also practiced some of these practices. And right, as you mentioned, I'm a Baha'i, and prayer is an important part of the Baha'i religious life. And in the course of my field research, I've also engaged with and encountered different kinds of prayer in different forms. Whether it's Chinese incense burning, which is, one could say, is a kind of prayer, burning for incense for deities, or engaging in different types of interfaith emotional gatherings with different types of prayer. And I think what's interesting is that, one thing that I find striking is that it seems to me that, well, I don't know, maybe in India, it might be completely different in India, but certainly in the more secularized Western context, and also the more secularized Chinese context, it seems that meditation is something that is more popular now. It's easy to talk about and for people to engage in practicing meditation than prayer. Somehow meditation has been more secularized, right? It fits better the secular kind of lifestyle and culture, whereas prayer is seen as something very religious, right? And so as somebody I teach a course at the University of Hong Kong on spirituality, religion, and social change. And it's a course in which I want not only students to learn about different forms of spirituality, but also to experience different forms. And I've always found it easier to introduce forms of meditation, but how would you actually introduce prayer in a university class? And it's only been 1 year that I've started to try to introduce the concept. But anyway, what I find to be, for me, there's as somebody who meditates in terms of breathing and visualization, and that form of meditation, because meditation also means to reflect, right? So to reflect on passages from scripture, to reflect while walking, in deep reflection is also meditation. The word doesn't belong to the Buddhist meditation tradition, or yoga, or these kinds of things. But what's interesting is that people are looking to try out different forms of spiritual practice. And meditation is popular because it's something that can be focused on yourself without dealing with another, actually. But the problem is that how can one find a ground and a stability if one is only focused within oneself? And so, students or people try out meditation, and right away, very fast, they find, well, it's actually very difficult. They want relaxation, but really, they're going to find their mind is running all over the place. They find it very hard to focus, and this and that, and it's very difficult. And at the moment when you really need it, when you're really stressed out, is actually not the time that you can get into a meditative state. But now I found that in prayer, prayer is a cry of the heart. And so one is not required to have mastered a certain technique. One is not required to have entered a certain state of relaxation or a state of focus. A cry out to God. So even when one is thinking about other things, when one is distracted by other things, but that cry that comes out from yourself is something that has no prerequisite. In fact, it doesn't even have any prerequisite of believing in God. So my first experience of prayer was actually, well, it wasn't on this side of the mountains, but on the other side, on the Chinese side, and driving in these mountainous roads and these trucks and buses, and you can see buses tumbling down, have tumbled down the cliff, and there you're praying for that driver. You know, and I didn't believe in God at that time, but I was praying.
Oh, that's okay.
So
That was the definition given by Eric Fromm for prayer.
What did he say?
Hope.
Hope.
You have
Yes.
hope.
Hope.
Even in the midst of kind of emptiness,
Yes.
you still keep hope.
Yes.
That's prayer.
Yes. So that is prayer. But then beyond that, in terms of relating to the other, so how maybe I see prayer in terms of relating to the other, and meditation in terms of relating to the other. So prayer is, the way I understand it, is entering into a relationship with God, right? It's and the Baha'i faith has there are beautiful prayers that are revealed by Baha'u'llah, and so these are in a sense words revealed by God for us to then read back to Him. Express these words of praise and these words of supplication. And for me, actually, these are words that that bring me into a different realm, a realm of I was a divine realm, and face to the perfection, being face to face with divine perfection. And so in our life, we're always engaging with different individuals, and we're being influenced by them. Right now, we're talking, and you're influencing me, and that's totally wonderful. But there's also a time when I enter into relation with the Supreme, with God, with all of the divine attributes, and so to have that, to come into relationship every day with that purity, can then influence me, and then I can bring that into, God willing, into my relations with other people. So for me, prayer is about relating to God, relating to the divine, and then bringing that relationship into my relations with other people. So that's maybe in a nutshell how I would see prayer. And then meditation. I think for me, what the experience of practicing Taoist meditation, there is that dimension of really going inside oneself and to discover the blissful realms of my own body. And that, and I don't know, this rootedness into deeper into the body, less into the intellect. It helps me to be more receptive. Right, to be more receptive to others, to the world, the mind is always, as soon as I hear you talking, my mind is already responding, right, at the level of the intellect. But there's somewhere else where it's not at that level, right? And so I think that, for me, that's what I find to be very valuable in meditation, is to go deeper than the intellect. So that would be some of my thoughts on prayer and meditation.
Very interesting. So very interesting. Perhaps I would say that it was my observation partly, but it was shared to me by a Zen Catholic, extremely political, kind of an activist. He's a Zen master, Zen Buddhist, and he's a Catholic Capuchin priest. Very radical kind of thing. He was telling prayer is invoked nostalgia, remembrance. Suppose if I go somewhere, maybe miles away, I think of you. Oh, Professor Palmer was so kind to me. That's a prayer. That energy will come and touch you, heal you. That's what he was saying. Yeah. So that kind of a prayer is liberatory, no doubt about it. So there we have only the other coming to self and creating a bridge and relationship, etc., etc. So what you say is extremely right. And in prayer, of course, I think that my idea may not be true. God is actually the absence of our ego. In Buddhism it is the same. Christian spirituality is the same. And our ego is not there. We not place ourselves at the center of the universe. That is God. And any act related with that is a prayer. That is true. So, but I accept fully, the idea of Baha'is and the kind of ideas that you were sharing about meditation and prayer. But I would like to ask you one more question. That is, you said, secular world, this meditation is becoming more popular. Perhaps in post-secular world, it is becoming more popular. So this meditation is a kind of body or biopolitics? As I was telling, regimentation. In the Foucauldian sense, or accompanies. This meditation, for example, I'm not sure because I was not very happy with this transcendental meditation and all these things. I've seen a lot of scholars, not a lot, at least 3-4 of them, from this Maharishi Yogi, there is an institute in America. Very brilliant minds. But some area they are brainwashed. A critical open dialogue is not possible. Something is making them stupid. It's a kind of, I would say that this wrath of the metaphysics. So how do you respond to this? This new rat race for practicing meditation, particularly in the Western world, India also. For example, I'll tell you, it's like political, after the coming of Narendra Modi, the surge of right-wing politics in India, yoga has been popularized. And some of the rationalist thinkers, the leftist thinkers in Kerala say that yoga is not an exercise at all, it's dangerous for your body. And I have listened to their talks. He's a doctor, he's a physical doctor, with examples he's telling. Then why yoga is becoming so popular? It's because of this kind of body politic which is working. And you feel that you are happy when you do that. You feel that you're part of a larger political will. Safety. So how would you respond to that?
Okay, there are several layers to that question. But I'll start first, because I think there are 2 layers. Which
this Modi part is a problem I meditate.
I think it's really, really interesting because it parallels. I've written a book on the Qigong movement in China, which has a lot of parallels with what you're talking about, perhaps the politicization of the spread of mass.
Authoritarian, totalitarian regimes controlling the body.
So, but I think there are 2 dimensions to this, which I'd like to talk about separately. One is what you're talking about is it's actually the biopower, or actually a form of governmentality in the Foucauldian sense, which we have, which is certainly the body is perfect, and meditation can certainly be seen as a perfect instrument of governmentality. That's the first level, and the second, though, is how these practices they fall into a left-right frame, and how then they are appropriated or rejected within different political ideologies and forms of national identity construction, which is related to the first question, but I also think it's a little, there's some difference too. What's interesting, the body, on the one hand, and I actually teach modern social theory in the sociology department at the University of Hong Kong, and I've even had a PhD student who wrote about applying Foucauldian biopower and governmentality to one specific Qigong movement in China.
Yeah.
And in a sense, right, it's so obvious, it's a low-hanging fruit, this idea that one learns how to discipline one's body in a voluntary fashion, and by doing so, then one's body and ultimately the depths of oneself is conforming to a structure, a socio-political power structure. And we can see this very well in the West. And I've written a book called Dream Trippers. I'm going to plug my book now, Global Taoism and the Predicament of Modern Spirituality, which really looks at how the Taoist meditation traditions, how they're appropriated in the West in what I call an ontology of ontological individualism, where the individual is the final authority on everything. And meditation practices, not only Taoists but others, just lend themselves so perfectly to that mindset in which one rejects any form of external authority, and I am the ultimate. My experiences are the only thing that is true, and I am the final authority on what I have experienced. So this works very well, and in a sense that reinforces a certain a consumerist type of culture, where everybody is at the pursuit of their own self and their own dreams. But these dreams are highly individualized, and so they actually cut off the possibility of forming relations, communal or community relations at a deep and enduring level, other than floating liquid modernity, individualistic network types of social relations. Now this is in contrast to the Taoist tradition in China, where in the monastic context, the meditative traditions involve aligning the body not only with oneself and the cosmos, but also the alignment of the body with one's master, the alignment of the body with the specific sacred site, the alignment of the body with the Taoist tradition. So the body becomes actually integrated into a whole reality, which is not only myself and the universe, but it's all of these intermediate, all of these other structures, including the political structure, China's imperial political structure. So all of these are actually integrated within the traditional mode of meditation. So now that's being decontextualized, right? It's being extracted and
this is kind of decontextualization.
Right, decontextualized, and that then it lends itself very well to modern or postmodern types of governmentality, which put the individual, in a sense, isolate the individual. But so that's an individualizing type of formulation or construction of meditation practices. But as what I saw in China in the 1980s and 90s, and perhaps what we might be seeing in India nowadays, I don't know enough about what's going on in India nowadays, but it's something quite different, which is actually about using these meditation techniques to actually create a modern political body. Right.
What is that?
Right. And where, again, there is a kind of decontextualization because we're no longer living in a traditional world. People's traditional relations have become weakened, and people are now more atomized as individuals. And so, in a more authoritarian context, then now we can, as we had in China, you would have thousands, tens of thousands of people practicing Qigong in parks and stadiums in unison, and all of them getting a sense of empowerment and also connecting to their national history and culture and civilization through that. And so this can become part of a state building, national identity building project. But as what happened in China with Falun Gong movement, for example, it can actually become an oppositional movement as well. So actually, so that shows that these techniques is infinitely malleable in so many different ways. But then the second part of what you were raising is, right, because you talked about how some critics, so we have, it seems to me that we have now, in terms of a Hindu revival in India, and so a revival of yoga and meditation practices as part of a kind of rediscovery and construction of a collective Indian subject. And this is part of this type of movement. And so then you have secular liberals, I suppose, who are not happy, right? Who are critical of this, and who are pointing out the political perhaps agenda underlying that, the risk of totalitarian mind manipulation that can take place. This construction, and even and these practices are actually, right, they're not always safe. They can be dangerous. So all of these, but I think one question that liberals or people who, secularists, liberals, should ask themselves is, what is it in that tradition that has rejected certain aspects of the spiritual, I don't know the Indian context, but maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but has there been one tendency, a modernizing kind of liberal tendency in India that has been more not well connected with the spiritual resources of India's traditions, and has seen that as something maybe hocus pocus and superstition, and so in a sense kind of then created a disconnect between an open cosmopolitan orientation towards India and the world, a disconnect between that and these meditative and spiritual traditions of India. And so the result is that those traditions become identified with one political ideology. But must it only be that way? Are these traditions really, why is it that, so I think this is a question that needs to be asked everywhere actually, as we have nativist traditions and movements that are arising all over the place. And is there not, is this not a sign of people also wanting to, I don't think they want to go back to the past necessarily, but they do want to, they find there's something of value in their traditions. And they want that to be alive, and they want to connect to that, and they want to practice that. So what's the way of doing that in a way that that's not limited by the construction of one narrow national or ethnic identity, that's not that doesn't become the instrument of a political or state-building project necessarily. So I think that's the challenge that I would ask those questions to those who are critical of the revival of yoga, right? I mean, there are surely a lot of problems with it, and I don't know enough about the Indian political reality, but I would want to, right, I guess because I'm an anthropologist, and so I see, the importance of different types of religion and spirituality that people have. And I think part of the problem that we see in the world is that the more cosmopolitan movement in the world has kind of become disconnected from many things, and that leads to the rise of all kinds of revanchist movements. So I don't have the answer for India, except my only answer is that to always remember that we're all one. As human beings, we're all one, but we also all do have a spiritual nature and a spiritual aspiration, and we need to find ways that collectively we can express that.
Thank you so much. And I think the only answer to this is kind of academic engagements, multiple level academic engagements. Not only academic, spiritual level, religious level, open, transparent engagements where we have I think multi-voice, multiple voices coming on this, and perhaps they can exist side by side and make a dialogue within themselves. As you said, that is the only solution, which I think many of our small academic ventures will help. As and when they come out and they interact with people outside. With this positive note, I say thank you to you.
Okay,
Thank you so much for your valuable time and your wonderful suggestions.
Great chat.
Yeah. So welcome once again to a conversation with Prof. Georgious T Halkias, a great Tibetan scholar. This scholar is working in Hong Kong, Center for Buddhist Studies. We started a conversation, sir, if you remember, about this embodiment in Buddhism. So perhaps in my presentation here, I was trying to connect all these things. Meditation, prayer, contemplative prayer, then intersubjectivity, the question of intersubjectivity. All these as a kind of post-traditional, post-metaphysical, post-religious understanding of meditation. And of course, I said this intersubjectivity dimension is becoming meaningful only when we think of embodiment supported by the whole idea of compassion. As long as Mahakaruna, compassion is there, all other theoretical objections based on the theories of Prasenjit Samutpada or Anatta, they become meaningless. So I think now in general Buddhism we have this Trikaya, three body and all that. These are all deployment of body within the living domain. So these are all about embodiment only. Though they are talking about Buddha's bodies, these are all about embodiment only. That's what I think. You can correct me if I am wrong. And if you come to Tibetan Buddhism, this is more elaborate. This is elaborate, as Catherine was presenting, different layers and all those things. Basically, they are all about body being deployed. Body is becoming part, center of our epistemic, ethical engagement. Knowledge is body knowledge. For example, if you go to the Indian Vedantic tradition, Sakshi, Atman, and if you go to medieval theology, Christian theology, soul, go to Greek theology, soul, anima. Body has become a very important theme. Only when people like Pamplany, Levinas, all those things. So, but this is there realized in a very interesting way in Tibetan Buddhism. So, what do you think about? We started this dialogue. I do that. I'm really sorry because I have all these funny duties as HOD, working as HOD and all that. Yes. A lot of things came, so I couldn't continue that dialogue with you. So, what would you like to say about that? This concept of embodiment, how does it work in Tibetan Buddhism?
Yes, well, thank you very much, first of all, for inviting me to this interview, and I think you raise a very important topic. But I'd like maybe to before we go deeper into this discussion, just to say kind of the context within Buddhism, since you bring Buddhism as a base here. In Buddhism, we don't have a radical division between mind and body. They're not separate entities. So unlike perhaps some of you being interested in discourse, emphasizing either the mind or Descartesian emphasis on the mind, therefore I exist, and this kind of discourse doesn't exist in Buddhism. So of course it can be hijacked by certain kind of groups to be brought into a kind of false dichotomy. But we need to start from the very beginning that mind and body are co-arising. There is no body without mind, there is no mind without body. To speak of a disembodied experience doesn't make any sense, it's meaningless. What do we mean? And at the same time, to speak of an embodied experience without consciousness, without an awareness, again, what does that mean? So in Buddhism, then, when we say embodied experiences, of course they're all embodied, but they're not just embodied. There is also awareness and mind together. So I don't know now in that kind of base and foundation, to how do we carry this conversation forward? I mean, what do you think would be a fruitful way, taking this as a base of our discussion?
Yeah, exactly. This is what I'm looking forward to.
Yes.
So, say, okay, Samaja, and so you send me a paper.
Yes.
Piercing the pick.
Right. Okay,
And
so
those kind of engagements,
yes.
and how do they actually place or ground the concept of body?
Okay, again, then we have to look at, first of all, Buddhism. I mean, the first very basic meditation is to follow the breath, which is a physical function. You know, we all breathe, we're just not conscious that we're breathing. So
Vipassana is basically making conscious of your body.
Of your body,
Nothing
exactly.
else.
Because we're mental creatures, and you know, we dwell in our mind, in our narratives, in our stories, and those are, we think are disembodied experiences, but they're not.
Yeah.
Because the kind of thoughts we have, the kind of feelings we have, actually are translated physically in our body. I mean, there has been a lot of research done about ailments and illnesses that actually are psychosomatic. I'm not discounting that there, of course, there are cases of illnesses that are purely physical factors, but the mind-body experience, or you know, we have to come to a term that actually includes both. In early Buddhism, of course, the Buddha discovered that we need to be able to be aware of our environment, that I'm sitting next to you, that I'm on the couch, that I'm in this room, that I'm surrounded, you know, instead of just living in my story, in my mind. And now, of course, Buddhism has a very long history, so when we now move to the Buddha Samaja or Tantric Buddhism, that's the last phase of Buddhism. It's the most mature. It's already about 1,000 years of development and experimentation with different techniques. So at that point now, we're talking about really understanding how mental content translates into physical sensations. There's a bridge between our thoughts and our body. But in early Buddhism, we don't really have a discourse about that. It's kind of something that develops much later with Mahayana and Prasenjit, the Tibetan forms. So basically, to be able to be sensitive enough to actually see your thoughts, how it affects the physical physiology. And to be able to do that, then there's a whole system of a subtle body anatomy that is developed in Tantric Buddhism. That basically, there's the body without organs. The delusion concept that we're not just the organs. There's another body, and you know, in Hinduism maybe they call it the astral body, or you know, there's different bodies. You know, all mystical traditions speak about those bodies. And with Tantric Buddhism, there's very specific techniques on how to actually become sensitive of that. And through that, to unify, again, the mind-body experience, to bring it in complete harmony, and that in itself is a form of realization. And so, again, we need to start, we're starting from a different kind of assumptions in Vajrayana Buddhism, that we're not constructing anything. We are coming to realize what has always been within us, this mind-body synthesis. Yeah. That somehow the fall of man, if you will, or the fall of mankind has been the separation between our physical experience and our mental content. Somehow those two have gone their separate ways. We think the superiority of mind. We think, you know, we're mental creatures. I mean, look at the discussion we're having now. We're relying on language, we're relying on concepts. Our whole construction, our whole engagement is at that level. But it's not only that, is it? No. There are certainly certain very subtle energies that are being exchanged that usually we're not aware in an ordinary context. Yeah. So yes, I think Vajrayana Buddhism and Tantric Buddhism really presents a kind of another way of looking at ourselves in the world that I think can be very useful in our times and with the problems that we are experiencing right now. So this whole movement again of overemphasizing the politics of the body. Again, in my opinion, is in the wrong direction, because the assumption is those things, we need to see how those two relate. The relationality between mind and body, not their individuation.
Yes. It's a very important point. So, as you were telling, meditation and embodiment, very close concepts.
Yes.
They go hand in hand. And of course, real understanding of embodiment is coming from meditation. And embodiment always presupposes meditation. It is kind of very intimate relationship. Prayer or whatever you call it, contemplation or whatever you call it. So, according to the modern, some kind of a post-phenomenological thinkers, Thomas Fuchs, all those people, they have very interesting idea about embodiment, modern ideas. So they are talking about these body memories. Body memories. So I think this body memories can be connected with memories of the body. And as somebody was Augustine was telling yesterday, each cell has got its own memory, its own decisions. So this is interconnected also. So this concept of body and the memory, could you just imagine how does it work in Tibetan Buddhism?
That's a very good point you're raising, because already of modern science now, just recently we had this conversation with a colleague here about how they discovered that there are neurons in the heart. Up until now, all the scientific research is that the brain is the neurons that are all here in our brain.
No.
But latest research actually has shown that the heart has a lot of neurons. So it's a thinking organ in the heart. The mind is not just the brain. And that already, I think, as science is progressing, and they're also in the guts, there are neurons.
Yes.
Which are beginning now to realize that this embodied experience that Vajrayana spoke in some of the mystical traditions, now scientifically, it is on the consciousness. I mean, a simple experiment I tell my students, I said, okay, can without you moving, can you feel your right toe? Can you?
No.
You can? Without moving, can you feel it? Can you feel your right toe on your body?
No, I'm wearing a shoe.
Okay.
So then I'm feeling,
knee?
otherwise no.
Can you feel your knee?
No. We cannot. I can't.
Okay. Usually, a lot of people, if you tell them, they can feel different parts, because consciousness is actually embodied. It's very possible that we can feel.
But if it is a kind of command, a suggestion, then you told me, now I feel.
Right. Exactly. And I think if I tell you can do it, then you've always been able to do it.
Yeah.
We've always been. And this
Perhaps meditation is this reflectivity. Professor Prasenjit was telling, this reflectivity. Reflexivity and reflectivity, both.
Yes.
Both.
Yes.
That's why when somebody says, I'm reflective of that, it's coming.
Yes.
So meditation is a kind of reflectivity of embodiment.
Yes.
Of the other, of the world.
Of course.
Yes.
All of it.
Yeah.
All of it. Again, at the higher level of meditation or contemplation, the division between self and other becomes really a conceptual distinction. Because again, consciousness is not only embodied in this physical form, it's embodied wherever the senses goes, consciousness goes. So in other words, whatever I see, wherever my eye is actually looking at something, consciousness is there as well. Through the eye faculty, through the hearing faculty, through all my senses, as it extends out, so my consciousness extends out. So, and also in society, if I'm in a group of people, my consciousness is inclusive of all these people. So, and this is another way of looking at relationality, and I think it's very important to realize that this, I think what Professor Palmer talked about ontological individualism, is probably the biggest delusion, the delusion that humans can engage in, because there is no such thing as ontological individualism. There is no individual. There's never been. The fiction of the individual, and Buddhism has been very good at deconstructing that at the very beginning in early Buddhism, the 5 skandhas, that the whole notion of self is nothing else but those 5 aggregates. There's the relationality between those 5 aggregates. So the notion of I is a construct. It's a mythological construct. And our whole edifice, it becomes a foundation for a whole narrative of the self, of the family, of society, of a nation state. And it extends into this storytelling. Basically, we're storytellers. The mind is a storyteller. And once we understand that, we can enjoy it. But at the moment we start believing the stories that the mind is making, then we're falling into the traps. And I think, this is a very important thing. Realizing that this is the function of the mind. The mind tells stories. It creates narratives. It's just like the stomach digests. That's its function, right? We won't question the stomach why it's digesting, but we know when it's not digesting. And it's the same with the mind. Its function is nothing else but to generate narrative. That's what the mind does. Once we realize that, we can let it do its course. Let it tell the stories. Don't follow them. And that's meditation. Don't grasp after them. Don't see them as real. Realize that that's what the mind does. It's its natural thing. And then we can go to a deeper understanding that transcends the narrative. So all those self-narratives, all this emphasis now in, post-modernity or post-secularity or however you want to call it, of the self, it's all self-narrative, it's all fiction. And you cannot cure a fiction with a fiction.
Yes, you can. Very interesting.
So, as far as I can tell, the way things are going, it's only a fiction built upon another fiction. And they're utilizing fiction to get out of a fiction. Now, how can you get out of a fiction when you're
very... That's talking about the Lava Chakra.
Yeah, exactly.
That illusion.
The illusion, exactly.
Yesterday, my presentation, I was equating what you were telling to a kind of constructed knowledge. And if you realize that this is constructed, that is understanding of Shunyata.
Yes. Exactly. Shunyata is nothing else but realizing the dependent originality of things, the relationality. That's emptiness. Emptiness doesn't mean nothingness. A lot of people think emptiness means nothing. No, it just means relationality. So I think this is the way to go, but I think, when the Buddha became enlightened, the story was that after he attained this kind of awakening and realization, the relationality of everything, the fiction of self, which is very important, he said he cannot teach. Nobody could understand what he realized. Because those teachings are very subtle and actually go against the whole narrative of being human. And I think this is what, even we can talk about it, but actually people to apply it and actually to see the transformative power of this view. Because it is a view, it's a way of looking at yourself in the world. And once you start looking at it through those lenses, you realize everything is transforming. And you realize mind and matter are not two separate ontological categories. They're actually interrelated. I think what Professor Palmer talked about prayer. Prayer is very transformative. Why? Because mind and matter interact. If you really go into that mode, your whole experience changes, your whole world changes, your relations change. And can we do that collectively? This I think is a good question. Can we do it as a group? Can we do it as a community?
So Hermann Hesse was perhaps literally capturing this. He was telling wisdom cannot be communicated. Siddhartha's last statement was that. Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha, and the last statement is wisdom cannot be communicated.
Yes.
So it's a very important insight about meditation, prayer, Viraga, all that. Because this is relational and experiential. With this note, I say thanks to you for this wonderful interview, conversation for a great time. And we'll continue this outside. This is a brief interview, but this dialogue will continue.
But just one last thing about wisdom that you mentioned.
Yes.
In Tibetan wisdom, they say knowledge can be transmitted in 3 different ways.
Yes.
The lowest form of transmission is dialogue.
Yes.
It's relying on language. That's the lowest. The second highest is symbolic language.
Symbolic language.
Mudras, for example, or hand gestures, or symbols, or when now the language becomes metaphorical at that level when it's not what we say, it's what we don't say, perhaps. That becomes equally important. And the highest level
silence.
of wisdom is silence.
Silence.
Where in silence we can communicate in a much deeper sense than any of the other two forms of communication. So with that, I think wisdom develops a path.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for your wisdom words. Thank you. Hearty welcome to Prof. George Thadathil, who is a scholar, Catholic leader, professor, and the chief organizer of the seminar, which was dealing with meditation, particularly under the title of religious practices across Himalayan spaces. So we were discussing about last 2 days about meditation from various angles, and of course the religious practices across Himalayan spaces. So meditation we were trying to look at from a post-traditional, post-religious point of view. Of course there is no difference between prayer and meditation. These are all some kind of perspective by which we look at the whole thing. Anyway, this is a kind of opening to the authority. In meditation or whatever, we go beyond some kind of a self-complacent understanding of ourselves and go to the other. So, since you are from Sri Narayana Guru tradition, I would like to ask about that. Because Sri Narayana Guru, I think, just like Prasenjit was talking about Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar and Tagore or Rajaram Mohan Roy, perhaps one of the chief architects of Kerala Renaissance is Sri Narayana Guru. There are other people also. And Sri Narayana Guru actually made meditation into a kind of political action. So he went beyond the traditional metaphysical religiosity. And there was a very interesting occasion. He is a lower caste Hindu. And he actually made the deity of Shiva in the temple. He installed the deity of Shiva. And the Brahmins came and asked him, you have no right to do this. Then he said, I have done an Irava Shiva. I have actually installed an Irava Shiva. I have installed a low caste Shiva. What is it for you? It is not a Brahmin Shiva. That solves the whole problem. Because it is owning up the lower caste or underprivileged people, owning up God Himself. So that is a very privileged kind of action of meditation. And throughout his life, this has been promoted, this idea of meditation has been promoted with the idea of Karuna. This that well-known poem, Karuna Dashakam, Anukamba Dashakam. Anukamba is a Malayalam word. Anukamba Dashakam. So 10 verses on Anukamba. Anukamba means compassion. That is a very clear statement of what is meditation, open to the other. So there are other people like that. So how do you respond to this? Now that tradition, how it was actually making Kerala Renaissance, Kerala culture of prayer, Kerala culture of interreligious and intercultural and kind of multi-ethnic living together. And this principle of coexistence I was always telling about meditation. Meditation should be, in a post-traditional sense, a method of coexistence. And wonderful model is Sri Narayana. Though he was living in the last century, he was giving a wonderful model of meditation. How do you look at it?
Dr. Pius, I'm glad that you brought this issue of Sri Narayana Guru, though we are here in the Himalayas, discussing about the religious practices of the Himalayas, precisely manifesting the crossing of all kinds of experiences and discourses about experiences, whether it was in ancient times to modern times, even without the kind of huge web world that we are in. Having said that, you see, to me, Narayana Guru, as you rightly said, is significant in terms of the transition that Indian consciousness is undergoing contemporaneously, because you need a kind of force or voice that challenges the dominant. So as you rightly hinted to his way of challenging that time, then dominance of the orthodoxy and its authority, even today, his followers, or let's say those who have some affinity towards that mode of thinking, that one should transcend the external manifestations of religiosity, religious expressions or religious practices, and come to realize the humanity underlying it as the unifying factor, divinity underlying it as the unifying factor, and the mode of communication or the opinion making process, literally what mother is in Malayalam, and which gets manifested as the religious expressions, as all unifying elements. And I think that goes as a critique to this hardlining of identity, which is happening in contemporary history in India today. So with that, when you look back at what Narayana Guru did in terms of having had mystical experience, having withdrawn into the Meltomale caves, not being contained in the solitariness of the cave, but being expelled in a way, or propelled to move down to the plains and to the agonies of ordinary people, from amidst whom, in a way, he withdrew for whatever reason. And there he starts his entire process of giving hope, making small transformations, setting up a mirror there instead of an idol, or putting a phrase, Mother Mary mentioned whatever be your religion, you should do better. So he set in motion a transformative process, as what I said, and that is having its reverberations across the world. In fact, you won't believe, in this very same space, 4 years ago, I was invited by the gathering of all Sri Narayana Guru disciples and small groups that are affiliated to promoting his way of thinking in India, in this eastern part of India. So, yes, the religious experience and meditation as a process that leads you to deeper and deeper religious experience, or the reverse, that of wherever one is, as a process of practicing meditation, discovering more and more of the true nature of oneself, having to necessarily connect with other human beings in distress. And I think here is where the meeting ground of Narayana Guru embody Jesus Christ.
Yes. Yeah, excellent. So perhaps I was highlighting this in my presentation when I was discussing with Professor Prasenjit before. Also, I was talking about Kappan's view about two strands of religiosity, or spirituality in India. Mainly not spirituality, religiosity. One is very ritualistic, gnostic, and powerful expressed, and virulent, which cannot forgive. As I was telling, when Mahatma Gandhi was associated with Ahimsa, and the reason for killing Mahatma Gandhi was this. Hindu religion was a very powerful, strong religion, and Mahatma Gandhi unnecessarily brought in Ahimsa and weakened it. So finish him off. I have no personal animosity against him. That's what he was telling, the person who assassinated Mahatma Gandhi. So this is one strand. The other one is the Buddha, ethical religiosity, and maybe many other bhakti movements and all that. And there are people, there is a kind of contemporary scholarship which I very seriously take. They are telling that they can associate this strand with Sri Narayana Guru, Mahatma Gandhi, Tagore, all of them. And what they are doing, which actually the left was ideologically playing against the orthodoxy and conservative religiosity in India. But they were playing in a safe ground outside. But Narayana Guru, Mahatma Gandhi, they were all inside, they were playing. They were engaging critics. They were inside, they were doing all that. They are not simply making a strategy or anything. They know they are inside.
This brings me to say, see, why are we, for example, as an educational institution, taking initiative in this project? Other than the circumstantial meeting of friends and people from across the collaborating centers, as an educational institution, that point of religion somehow having been excluded from educational process and educational discourse, that's what we are now in a way paying for the last 75 years in the name of secularism, having kept religion out of the discourse to end minds. So now who is getting the right to indoctrinate the wrong elements?
Wrong elements,
Or they are not getting the right perspective, let's say. So, but we need better late than never kind of bring religion to discourse within campuses.
Yes.
So then these to some extent the criticality, that's why I liked one of our enigmas presentation of Buddhism, to give that critical voice to your own tradition.
Yes.
So that intra-critique should be the first, not that I am here to attack somebody else's expression.
Exactly.
I critique my tradition because I believe in my tradition.
Yeah.
And I see its possibility of its liberation there, but also the negatives. So when this critique internally happens, and that is placed, that gives courage to the other who is more reluctant. And I can see, for example, over the last 5-6 years of our own interaction with Rafat, how his own progress has happened. And to be critiquing within Islamic orthodoxy is a very, let's say, more difficult task as in all orthodoxy to make any dent. But I think that's why I appreciate you being in a secular space, being able to engage, even to bring this kind of a discourse through the both academic process as well as networking and communicating a bit of that through your own writing in the newspapers. I think as academics we have certain limits, but our mode of engaging, whether it is Jamuna or G.N. Reddy or P. Zainab, the left voices that you refer to. And I think that kind of intellectuality is still there. And what they are writing about is also being read by the bureaucrats who maybe for whatever reason are today subservient to an administration in which just for pragmatic purposes they believe that personalization. I mean, you can appreciate his own reasoning to a great extent. But then is he just for the sake of administrative kind of role being blind to some of these negatives that we are seeing in the kind of direction it is taking, or the education department or wherever. So this discourse and negotiation, people like Prasenjit, and I think a whole lot of people are trying to do today in India, or in India, Missoula, in JNU,
and the other one, I forgot his name, the wonderful presentation that day, Jadavpur.
Chibashi.
No. Rafat mentioned his name. We were all there for his presentation. I remember. So one thing I'm telling you, we were telling that. So I was trying to associate, meditation with intercultural and all that. So whatever intercultural that we're talking about, ethical or interactive, it involves self-critique. If you are making intercultural engagement, the core of it is self-critique. You have to critique yourself without auto-critique. No? This is what people like Mahatma Gandhi and people in Ireland were doing. Yeah, a friend of you was telling, So Mahatma Gandhi went and read in Bhagavad Gita. All that is not there. Bhagavad Gita is telling in a very beautiful language, you kill. But Gandhi was telling, he got the principle ahimsa from Bhagavad Gita only. So that's a very interesting reading. And these kind of reading, of course. So, for example, our liberation theologians are making wonderful reading of the Bible and bringing out very important cries from there. These kind of activities, I think, perhaps you are referring to. And I think our seminar also, in a way, is a small step towards that. And we have great scholars like Prasenjit, Biswas, David Palmer and Georgious T Halkias and Subba and you and all of us, perhaps we are also making a kind of internal critique of the space that we occupy, academic or cultural or religious or whatever. So I would like to, my last perhaps question, what do you think about the prospects of the international seminar? To what extent we will continue this? Professor Georgious T Halkias was telling that we will immediately go for a seminar, later, go for a seminar about meditation and embodiment, all that. So,
I was
you just the kind of achievement that you've made by giving an institution, giving the space, and doing a lot of organizational work, effort putting into it. How do you look at it now? Now, because tomorrow the sessions are over.
Yeah. I was thinking of what Roger T. Ames, he did a whole series of work in China and, entire Asian consciousness, self-perception. I mean, the fact that we got together from different institutions and we have created this human space of being able to understand each other and to say, yes, I see both the expressed and the intended. So that there is no agenda other than facing the truth of the world situation, of our contemporary Indian situation, of in so many other societies. What is it that we can do? What we are doing is what the right thing that we can do. So if just like despite 4 years of wait from 2019 what was disrupted we are able to do and carry through, I'm sure what is genuine and true about this will find its own continuity. And this again going back to Narayan's disciple Nataraja would say, if you dare to create vacuum, nature abhors vacuum, it will get filled. So I think it's not that I have to do everything or you have to do everything, but it's like seeds germinating. So our coming together is like a seed in contemporary situation. Just like we don't know what made Project Ames to do that and bring so many scholars and bring out volumes, which I as an young scholar read. Oh boy, great minds, and they are addressing issues in such a relevant way. And that gave direction to me. So we never know what will be the impact of the little publication that we will do together. Definitely that much we are going to do, especially with Prof. Subba now having retired and being in delivery and having promised our institution some kind of support, just like he's giving research support to Malaysia University. So I think with his kind of a person to guide, seeing it through is one thing we will do. What will be the continuity in terms of the series, etc. That I think will depend on you to a great extent, because you are in institutional space. Halkias to some extent, but it's an institutional space for the development. So whereas so that I think or someone else who may come in, Prasenjit. So let's see how it will move, and I think we have set in motion something. Is a kind of confidence that I have. And that's what we are saying.
So one small final technical question. That is, the new education policy has come. You are the principal of a well-known college also. Now MA level, postgraduate level, this NEP has been implemented. Now immediately the 4-year BA course will come. And people do not know anything about this course and how it should be. Some people, for example, Prasenjit Biswas, I want to think that this is a kind of dilution of higher education. And there is a particular course called community engagement. So you will have to deal with that community engagement. I think Salesians and Christian spiritual groups were doing this community engagement without any course pressure or anything. But now in university I struggle, I did something. But students are not disposed to it. They do not know anything. So this community engagement and of course the kind of themes that we are dealing with, can we associate some kind of NGOs, as spiritual groups, maybe Buddhist, Christian, and that kind of a religious engagement and community engagement. If we can bring this together, the kind of work that we are doing in academic space. You were talking about religion is to be discussed and brought into as a discourse. Is it possible?
Yeah.
Is it because the left wing or the secular people would say that this is a regressive thing? How do you look at this? Because without religion, you cannot imagine public sphere. Agamas was telling public sphere is without religion. But later he said no, religion is a space. There is a well-known book on that. So all these people, Charles Taylor, all of them are saying that public sphere cannot be imagined without religion. Because otherwise there is a religious public sphere. So there we can have a kind of very serious engagement on this community engagement, because nobody knows what is community engagement. This is actually taken from American model, but America, they have very well developed a system. And here there is no system in place, and this is becoming worsening of academic excellence. Destroying academic excellence. As a principal of the college and at this, in connection with this seminar, would you like to find out some linkage or some connection?
Yes, the two things. One is technically addressing the issue. I think now that the policy is in place and including our foreign government has accepted it after having resisted it for a while, I think the structure will find its own way of accommodating it. That's number one. And the process is on. With its plus and minus, it might take some years for stabilizing, but then the process is on. Now, when Shashikant was presenting, there was one of the slides, the word service readiness. I wanted to ask actually in Baha'i context where it comes from, because we have been already engaged with Polytechnic University in Mumbai, which has got 25,000 students doing service learning. And we collaborated with them, even during pandemic, for their students to do service learning for our deprived students of our neighborhood, with our computer science students on artificial intelligence related teaching. So, we have an entire community engagement office now. They engage with NGOs in the locality. So, what the students are learning in the first year, second year, by the second half of the second year, as they are into third semester, they take a component of what they have learned, identifying a community group. Maybe it is psychology and learning, or it is inclusive learning of education department, and maybe the other able children who are in a care home. So how the students connect. So it's happening, and it is possible to make it happen, as it is happening in the US or in Hong Kong. So if our structures are preserved with the minimum set of faculty that is required, even in the government body, now that I am NAC mentor for an entire district, I know the ground reality of where they are right now. Is not that the goodwill is lacking or understanding of the policy is lacking, but in the implementation level, the kind of support that is needed. So that how it will transition is difficult to say. So on one side,
civil society support you.
Yeah, because if the NGO is also there to come and support, then it is an added support for a department that is not having full force and still have to engage the students in community engagement. So I am talking about average college, and like for us, it is definitely possible to do, and we have been doing. And to that extent, I think this transition is taking us forward with little maybe a struggle, but I see it as a positive thing. Anyway, the change has to come. The national level, imposing it and the student is being done, and the consequences of dilution that they are referring to is not there. But for those with the willingness and the basic infrastructure and the staff structure, I think it's possible to make it.
Thank you so much for your very interesting conversation, and thank you for organizing this wonderful seminar.